For the question and answer session. Thank you everybody who wrote questions. I'm going to select some of these for our distinguished panel to answer. Okay, so I think we'll just pass mics around. Okay, great. All right, so some of these are about symptoms. You guys about ready? Excellent, okay. What can I do to help improve enunciation and swallowing difficulties? Related, how can I improve my balance?
So, unfortunately, that is not the best question for those of us currently here who are not quite speech therapists. It's a good question, though, and this is one of the reasons that we do recommend to go to speech therapy. The kind of exercises that they propose are really quite helpful, and it is all about rehabilitation of the vocal cords. Actually, John, do you want to say a few words about this? John is, I'm now looking at you thinking, who am I talking to if John is in the audience? John, come up here. Here's the microphone.
Well, no, you've already hit the nail on the head that I think that everybody who has Parkinson's has been diagnosed and working with someone at the University of Cincinnati should be developing a long-term relationship with a speech-language pathologist, a speech therapist, as well as your physical therapist and your occupational therapist. And I know you have the huge team there that can do that. Because speech and swallowing, they use a lot of the same musculature, and as you work on one, you'll definitely benefit and you'll improve the other, and then you can also target any particular issue you're dealing with, and you want to make sure that the work you're doing is targeted. But again, a speech-language pathologist, optimally one that's working within a movement disorders clinic that has real expertise and sees a lot of people living with Parkinson's, so they have a real breadth of experience like you would at the University of Cincinnati's program. That's exactly where I would go with that.
Thank you so much, John.
Yay.
Excellent.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Next question. Have there been any studies of the significance of vitamin B in Parkinson's disease?
No.
Not so much. Awesome. Okay,
Let
this
me
one
take
says,
that. No.
Okay. Do Parkinson's medications over time affect the liver or kidney function?
No.
No. Excellent. Okay. Let's see here. I have some. Okay, this one says it's for Dr. Espay, but I'm going to take it. This one is, how many people in your biomarker study are people of color? If you have a diverse group of people, are you seeing similar findings among the different races and ethnicities? How do you get involved in this study?
Who is asking the question should be the one answering. I think you'd be great to answer that question because you've been looking precisely at this in our cohort. Dr. Hill has been looking at one of the most important elements that relates to racial disparities in Cincinnati, but focusing on the cohort of the CCBP. What's the latest finding that you have uncovered as a result of that analysis?
Yes, well, to start with that, we are looking at how social and environmental factors can impact Parkinson's disease symptoms. There have been a couple of studies recently showing that people with Parkinson's disease were more likely to come from less deprived communities, which means just wealthier areas. But we found that in our group, people who had more deprivation in the neighborhood, so higher poverty markers, had worse Parkinson's symptoms. So we're working on that. But, okay, to the question of different races and ethnicities, in the CCBP, just focusing on Parkinson's disease, it was single digits. It was only 8 people who were Black or African American with Parkinson's disease in the study. So only 5% of our Parkinson's disease patients identify as Black or African American, even in diverse cities. So we're a part of a study that's across the country: Chicago, Atlanta, Cincinnati, I'm trying to think where else. I think Philadelphia.
Baltimore?
Atlanta. Looking at just trying to understand if there are differences between the different racial groups. So we're just doing a one-time visit for UPDRS and different questionnaires to see if there are differences. And then the next thing we hope to do is to try to go out into the community and find if there are people who are being missed. We know that the levodopa improves your quality of life. If you don't have tremor, sometimes people don't know you have Parkinson's disease, and that can be true even of doctors. So we need to go educate primary care doctors and see if we can find people who are able to take this medicine and feel better. So that is something that's ongoing. And to get involved, we do have some flyers out front. So, and then find me, I'll help you get involved too. All righty. Next question, does lack of sleep relate to off periods?
Is lack of sleep associated with off periods, inducing off periods? In general, lack of sleep is a problem with the restoration of what you need to get going. So if your sleep hygiene is fractured, your daytime function will suffer. And among the things that will be obvious is that there might be some more off periods. That will be the connection there. And sometimes we chase the tail by trying to adjust the medications during the daytime when we need to really work on is on trying to restore sleep hygiene. Any thoughts on that sleep motor fluctuations connection, Ben?
Well, as was explained to me by Dr. Fasano, your tremor or your dystonia or your symptoms of Parkinson's, they often can occur at nighttime, and that actually wakes you up as well. And so something that happened to me after I got DBS is I started to sleep like a baby again because of the fact that I got rid of a lot of those symptoms. So the alleviation of those symptoms really helped my sleep ability as well. I don't know if that's exactly related, but...
Oh, that's a great point. Chicken and the egg, for sure. Okay. So
Let's also add in that it depends on your level of physical activity, right? If you're sedentary all day, you tend to fall asleep. So you're napping, and that disrupts everything. So again, exercise.
Good point.
So prior studies of stem cells in Parkinson's disease had a lot of dyskinesia was the problem. Do we think that the new forms of stem cells might not have that problem if they're from the host or if they're taken at the correct day of the cell culture?
Yeah, yes, that is the case. Yeah. So, kind of as I presented, if you take the same cells from the patient, him or herself, right, you will avoid immune interactions, and supposedly, theoretically, the dyskinesias that are associated with it. So that's why, the big advance here that I said is that it's from patients' own skin cells that you can develop, you can transform into dopamine cells in a dish, implant it into the area of the brain that's devoid of dopamine, that's missing, and then the idea is the stem cells, now dopamine cells, will send out their processes, contact tissue, and then release dopamine where it's supposed to be, which will then smooth out and hopefully alleviate motor movements and maybe even some non-motor movements.
Good. If memory can be stimulated by smell, can a lack of smell associated with Parkinson's disease negatively affect memory?
We don't know. That's a great question, though. It is something that Dr. Abhi Mahajan will be studying. He's recently found the association between lack of smell and apathy. It's interesting because the way he presented to us is, well, you smell and you can get all sorts of creative thoughts and emotions. But if you're not smelling, is it possible that it is then dampening those emotions and therefore potentially generating apathy? And he found that there are shared elements in studying brains' connections between loss of sense of smell and the apathy. And as apathy is connected to behaviors and behaviors to cognition, as Dr. Devoto mentioned, it is conceivable that something that's referred to as smell nurturing, there is a term for it, there's sort of a therapy where you get to have experiences of olfaction, a lot of sense of smell, could in fact translate into improvements in behaviors, improvements in apathy, and potentially cognition. That is an if that requires to be tested in a clinical study.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Can you address some ways to combat the effects of orthostatic hypotension?
So orthostatic hypotension, I'm so glad that Sarah presented some of her story. So she talked to us about how she ended up using salt tablets for that. So there are non-pharmacologic strategies. Salt tablets is kind of non-pharmacologic because salt is something we all have access to. And for those of us not accustomed to salt, we can add salt tablets that are over the counter. In general, increasing the water content or increasing fluids that are non-caffeinated, because coffee actually is dehydrating, makes us urinate, is good. Water, salt, and then thigh-high compressive stockings. I'm very impressed by how effective the compressive stockings can be in people who have orthostatic hypotension. In fact, people that I have thought we needed to use therapies of some sort with compressive stockings get the job done. And then if that doesn't work, then of course there are a variety of therapies, but I think those are the most important. There are exercises when people are standing and the symptoms appear to increase abdominal pressure. You can actually do this, and that helps. And so the crossing of the legs is something that we sometimes tell our patients to consider if they're waiting in line at a grocery store, et cetera, something that actually does this. It's remarkable how well it can keep the blood pressure up. Simple strategy to kind of pull up at any time of need.
Great. I usually tell people whatever compression stockings they will wear is okay. Maureen, do you have experience with that? With certain types of compression stockings that are better?
It's very hard to get people to wear thigh-high. and it's even hard to get people to wear the knee-high,
Yeah.
right? What's the biggest issue? They're hard to put on. So you know what? You buy a pair of $1 yellow plastic gloves that your mom used to use washing dishes. They have little ridges. It makes it much easier to pull them up.
A great tip.
There's my tip for the day.
Other tips?
I have a question actually for the panel. I look around the room and I see a lot of people with Parkinson's, but I see very few people with dyskinesia. Why is that? Is it that you guys are doing such a good job and everyone's so well controlled? or something else, yeah.
I know, I'm pretty strict about timing of medication for my patients, so it could just be the timing right now. I like to see a little bit of dyskinesia, honestly, and I tell patients that. It means they're not undertreated. But sorry, I'm not even on the panel. I shouldn't have taken that one. I can't help it.
No, good point. Good point. I think there is a lot to it. Dosage is good. The kinds of really bad, severe dyskinesias we see rarely. They are not as common as they used to be. But it is likely that early on, when people were dosing themselves on a needed basis, this is the what I consider the price of success. Michael J. Fox, when he's confessed this, that when he was beginning to be treated for this, he would just be given these pills that he could just take whenever he would just feel like he needed them. So he had them in his pocket. He would just pop them here and there. Not quite what the brain likes, and so what that created was likely what we today refer to as maladaptive plasticity. It's a bit of a temper tantrum that the brain ends up generating, translating into what we call dyskinesia. And so that idea we discourage. We don't ask patients to take it on a needed basis. Now, people could take 2 pills a day early on and get by with it, but we say let's start with 3 or even 4 sometimes, because it is a bit of an investment in the future. The brain likes it to have fewer fluctuations. So the more consistent you are from the very beginning, the less likely becomes that at some point in time you'll have to deal with this severe dyskinesia. So this could be perhaps one of the reasons you don't see as much of it here. I think it's an investment that we've made from the early part of treatment.
That'll be interesting to see with the infusion therapies as well. If those skin therapies take off, we'll see what happens. I feel like we're over time. I feel like maybe we should end it there. What do you guys think? Yeah, but thank you. This is an excellent panel, and thank you all for coming. I know you have some closing remarks.